September 2nd, 1864. Atlanta is burning. Not by accident, not from stray artillery shells or panicked looters. The fires are deliberate. They are controlled. They are policy. Major General William Tecumseh Sherman stands on a hill outside the city watching the smoke rise into the Georgia sky. The flames paint his gaunt face orange in the twilight. His coat hangs loose on his frame. He has lost 20 pounds in the campaign. His eyes are sunken, his red beard shot through with gray. He looks like a prophet from the Old Testament. He looks like a man who has seen the future of warfare, and it terrifies him, but he is going to do it anyway. The telegraph wire hums. A message clicks through from City Point, Virginia. It is from Ulysses S. Grant. The message is brief, congratulatory. Grant writes that the capture of Atlanta has secured Lincoln's re-election. The war can continue. Sherman reads it. He folds the paper. He turns to his staff and says something that will not appear in any official record. He says the war is not won by capturing cities. It is won by breaking the will to fight. And tomorrow he is going to show them how. What happens next is not taught in high school textbooks. It is glossed over, sanitized, turned into a march on a map with a red arrow sweeping from Atlanta to Savannah. But the reality is darker. It is more calculated. It is the moment American warfare stopped being about armies fighting armies and became about nations consuming nations. And it began with a private conversation between two men who understood that mercy, in the long run, could be the cruelest thing of all. To understand why Sherman burned his way across Georgia, you have to go back 6 months. You have to go back to the spring of 1864 when Grant is elevated to command of all Union armies. Grant is not a traditional general. He does not care about capturing territory. He does not care about headlines in the newspapers. He cares about one thing, ending the war. And he knows the South will not quit just because you beat them in a battle. They have been beaten before. They came back. They are fueled by something deeper than logistics. They are fueled by belief, by pride, by the myth of invincibility. Grant knows that to end the war, you have to kill the myth. Grant calls Sherman to his headquarters in Nashville. They sit in a cramped hotel room that smells of cigar smoke and damp wool. Grant lays out the strategy. He will take the Army of the Potomac and hammer Lee in Virginia. He will pin Lee down, never let him maneuver, never let him breathe. But that is only half the plan. The other half is Sherman. Sherman will take an army into the heart of Georgia. His target is not Richmond. His target is not the Confederate Army. His target is the Southern home front, the factories, the railroads, the farms, the food. Sherman listens. He leans back in his chair. He chews on a cigar. He understands instantly. Grant is not asking him to fight a battle. He is asking him to wage a campaign of economic destruction. Sherman's face hardens. He has been thinking about this for months. He has been reading the reports. The South is a hollow shell. The Confederate government in Richmond is printing money that is worthless. The army is starving. But the civilian population still believes. They believe because they have not felt the war. The war has been fought in Virginia, in Tennessee, in the border states. But the heart of the Confederacy, the Deep South, is untouched. The plantations are still running. The crops are still growing. The railroads are still moving supplies to the front. As long as that infrastructure exists, the Confederacy can keep fighting. Sherman says to Grant, "I can make Georgia howl." Grant looks at him. He does not smile. He does not nod enthusiastically. He simply says, "Do it." This is the secret agreement. This is the unspoken contract that will define the last year of the war. Grant gives Sherman total freedom. He does not tell him to be gentle. He does not tell him to follow the traditional rules of war. He tells him to break the South's ability to make war. How Sherman does it is up to him. Sherman marches out of Chattanooga in May with 100,000 men. The campaign for Atlanta is a brutal chess match. The Confederate general facing him is Joseph Johnston. Johnston is a professional. He is cautious. He does not take risks. He fights a defensive war, falling back, entrenching, forcing Sherman to attack fortified positions. Sherman loses men by the thousands at places like Kennesaw Mountain, where he orders a frontal assault that turns into a slaughter. But Sherman is not trying to win battles. He is trying to get to Atlanta. He is trying to reach the industrial heart of the Confederacy. Johnston falls back. He falls back again. He is trading space for time. He is bleeding Sherman's army without risking his own in a decisive battle. It is smart. It is professional. But it is also infuriating to Jefferson Davis, the Confederate president. Davis wants a fighter. He wants a general who will attack, who will throw the Yankees back. On July 17th, Davis fires Johnston and replaces him with John Bell Hood. Hood is the opposite of Johnston. He is aggressive. He is reckless. He has lost the use of one arm and one leg in previous battles. He is held onto his horse with straps, but he has the heart of a berserker. He attacks Sherman 3 times in 10 days. He loses every time. He bleeds his army white. By September, Hood abandons Atlanta. He marches his army out and leaves the city to Sherman. Sherman enters Atlanta like a conqueror, but he does not parade through the streets. He looks at the city and sees a problem. Atlanta is a logistics hub. It has railroads. It has factories. It has warehouses full of supplies. As long as it exists, it is a magnet. Sherman will have to garrison it. He will have to defend it. He will have to tie down thousands of troops to hold it. And for what? To say he captured a city? Sherman is not interested in symbolism. He is interested in results. He makes a decision that shocks his own officers. He orders the civilian population to evacuate. Every man, woman, and child must leave. The mayor begs him to reconsider. Families have nowhere to go. Sherman is unmoved. He writes a letter to the mayor that is brutal in its honesty. "War is cruelty," Sherman writes. "You cannot refine it. The crueler it is, the sooner it will be over." He means it. Sherman believes that mercy now, allowing the civilians to stay, allowing the city to function, is actually prolonging the war. It is prolonging the killing. He sees himself as a surgeon. You do not hesitate with the knife because it hurts. You cut clean and fast so the patient can heal. The civilians leave. Wagons choked with furniture, crying children, old men cursing the Yankees. The city empties, and then Sherman begins the demolition. He does not burn the whole city. That is the myth. He burns the military infrastructure, the railroads, the foundries, the warehouses, the machine shops. His engineers are methodical. They heat the railroad iron in bonfires until it glows red, then twist it around trees. Sherman's neckties, the soldiers call them, useless, unsalvageable. The fires spread, wind catches the sparks, wooden buildings ignite. By the time Sherman marches out of Atlanta on November 15th, a third of the city is ash. But Atlanta is just the beginning. Sherman's next move is the one that defines him. He proposes to Grant something insane. He wants to cut loose from his supply lines. He wants to abandon the railroads, abandon the telegraph, abandon all contact with the North. He wants to take 60,000 men and march across Georgia to the sea, living off the land, destroying everything in his path. No communication, no reinforcements, just a self-contained army moving like a horde of locusts. Grant hesitates. This is not conventional warfare. If something goes wrong, if Sherman's army is trapped or defeated, there is no way to help him. Lincoln is nervous. He writes to Grant asking if this is wise. Grant looks at the map. He looks at the psychology of the situation. Hood's army is still out there. Hood is marching north into Tennessee trying to draw Sherman back. If Sherman takes the bait, the war goes on forever. But if Sherman ignores Hood, if Sherman marches east and proves that the Confederacy cannot defend its own heartland, the psychological impact will be devastating. Grant sends the approval. He writes to Sherman, "I do not see that you can withdraw from where you are to follow Hood without giving up all we have gained. If you can see a chance of destroying Hood's army, go ahead. If not, take the other course." The other course, the march to the sea. Sherman cuts the telegraph wire himself. He is the last man to leave Atlanta. He watches the city burn in the distance. A reporter asks him where he is going. Sherman smiles. It is not a happy smile. "I am going to make Georgia howl," he says. November 16, 1864, the army moves out. It is not a march. It is a controlled rampage. Sherman divides his force into 4 columns. They move on parallel roads, 60 miles wide. They do not carry supplies. They carry ammunition. They forage for food. Sherman issues Special Field Order number 120. It is the rule book for the destruction. The order is precise. The army will forage liberally on the country. Soldiers are to be organized into foraging parties under the command of officers. They are to gather corn, meat, vegetables, whatever they can find. But here is the key clause. In districts where the army is unmolested, the foraging will be limited. Civilians who cooperate will be left with enough to survive. But in areas where the locals resist, where they burn bridges or fire on soldiers, the order is different. In those areas, the destruction is to be more ruthless. The army is authorized to destroy mills, cotton gins, and anything of value to the enemy. This is the innovation. Sherman is using terror as a tactical weapon. He is telling the Southern civilians, If you leave us alone, we will take your food but leave you alive. If you fight us, we will burn everything. It is psychological warfare. It is a message that spreads faster than the army itself. Within days, the roads are clogged with refugees, not fleeing ahead of the army, but following it. Enslaved people, thousands of them. They walk away from the plantations. They follow the blue columns. They believe the Yankees are Moses. They believe this is liberation. Sherman does not want them. This sounds harsh, but it is the truth. Sherman is not an abolitionist. He is not fighting to free the slaves. He is fighting to restore the Union. The presence of thousands of refugees slows his march. They eat the food his men need. They clog the roads, but he cannot turn them away. They are coming anyway. One of his subordinates, General Jefferson C. Davis, makes a horrific decision. At a place called Ebenezer Creek, Davis's column crosses a pontoon bridge. Behind them are hundreds of freed slaves. Davis orders the bridge dismantled before the refugees can cross. Confederate cavalry is pursuing. The refugees are trapped. They try to swim. Many drown. Women, children. The screams carry for miles. Sherman hears about it later. He is furious, not because of the moral horror, but because it is bad publicity. It is the kind of story that the northern newspapers will seize on. It undermines the narrative that the Union is the righteous liberator. But the march continues. The foraging parties, called bummers by the soldiers, range out from the columns. They are supposed to be disciplined. They are supposed to follow the rules. But war does not work that way. The bummers become a law unto themselves. They ransack plantations. They take the silver. They take the jewelry. They burn barns, not because they are military targets, but because they can. Some of them are criminals. Some are just young men drunk on power. Sherman knows this is happening. He tries to control it, but he also understands that the chaos is part of the strategy. The South needs to feel helpless. They need to feel that their government cannot protect them. The army moves through Milledgeville, the state capital. They do not burn the town, but they mock it. The soldiers break into the state house. They hold a mock session of the legislature. They pass resolutions repealing the secession ordinance. They drink the governor's wine. It is a circus. It is humiliation. Then they burn the arsenal and move on. The psychological impact is devastating. The Confederate government is screaming for help. Where is the army? Where is the cavalry? Why is no one stopping Sherman? The answer is simple. There is no one to stop him. Hood is in Tennessee. Lee is pinned in Virginia. The interior of Georgia is defenseless. By mid-December, Sherman reaches Savannah. The city is on the coast. It is fortified, but the defenses are weak. Sherman surrounds it. He brings up siege guns. The Confederate commander, William Hardee, looks at the situation. He sees that he is outnumbered. He sees that the city will fall. On the night of December 20th, Hardee evacuates his troops. He leaves the city to Sherman. Sherman enters Savannah on December 22nd. He sends a telegram to Lincoln. I beg to present you as a Christmas gift the city of Savannah with 150 heavy guns and plenty of ammunition. Also about 25,000 bales of cotton. Lincoln is elated. The Northern public is ecstatic. Sherman is a hero. But the march is not over. Sherman looks at the map. He looks north, South Carolina, the state where the war started, the state that fired on Fort Sumter, the state that led the secession. Sherman's men hate South Carolina. They blame it for the war. They blame it for the death of their friends. When Sherman marches into South Carolina in January 1865, the destruction is worse. It is deliberate. It is vengeful. The soldiers do not need orders. They burn everything. Plantations, towns, courthouses. They are not liberating. They are punishing. Columbia, the state capital, burns on February 17th. Sherman's men claim the fires were started by retreating Confederates. Civilians claim the Union soldiers started them. The truth is, probably both. The city is full of cotton bales. The Confederates set fire to the cotton to keep it from Union hands. The wind spreads the fire. The Union soldiers, drunk on confiscated whiskey, do nothing to stop it. Some actively feed the flames. By morning, Columbia is a smoldering ruin. Sherman watches. He does not order the burning, but he does not stop it either. Here is the question that historians argue about. Was Sherman a war criminal, or was he a realist? The answer depends on what you think war is for. If war is about chivalry, about honor, about soldiers fighting soldiers, then Sherman broke the rules. He waged war on civilians. He destroyed private property. He spread terror. But if war is about breaking the enemy's will to fight, about ending the conflict as quickly as possible, then Sherman was effective. Brutal, yes, but effective. By the time he reaches North Carolina in March, the Confederacy is collapsing. Lee is trapped in Virginia. Johnston is trying to stop Sherman with an army that is outnumbered and demoralized. The Southern civilians have lost faith. They see that their government cannot protect them. They see that the myth of Southern invincibility is a lie. On April 9th, Lee surrenders to Grant at Appomattox. Sherman is in North Carolina negotiating with Johnston. When Sherman hears the news of Lee's surrender, he offers Johnston generous terms. He offers to let the Confederate soldiers go home. He offers to recognize the Southern state governments. It is too generous. Lincoln's cabinet rejects the terms. They force Sherman to renegotiate. Sherman is angry. He feels betrayed. He thought he was doing what Grant and Lincoln wanted. He thought he was making peace. But here is the secret that Sherman and Grant both understood. The march through Georgia and the Carolinas was not about peace. It was about demonstrating power. It was about showing the South that resistance was futile. It was about breaking the psychological foundation of the rebellion. The South did not lose because they ran out of soldiers. They lost because they ran out of hope. Sherman killed that hope. He did it by burning the farms. He did it by destroying the railroads. He did it by marching an army through the heart of the Confederacy and proving that the Confederate government could not stop him. In the years after the war, Sherman became a controversial figure. Southerners hated him. They called him a monster. They called him a butcher. They wrote memoirs painting him as a demon. But Sherman did not apologize. He believed he had done the right thing. He believed that the South needed to be taught a lesson. He believed that the faster you make war horrible, the faster it ends. He wrote in his memoirs, "War is hell. You cannot refine it. Those who brought war into our country deserve all the curses and maledictions a people can pour out." Grant never publicly criticized Sherman. Even when politicians and newspapers attacked Sherman's methods, Grant stood by him. Why? Because Grant understood what Sherman was doing. Grant knew that the traditional way of fighting the war, the way McClellan fought it, the way Hooker fought it, was not working. You could beat Lee in a battle, and he would retreat and fight again. You could capture Richmond, and the Confederacy would move the capital and fight on. The only way to end the war was to destroy the South's ability and willingness to fight. Sherman did that. He did the dirty work that no one else had the stomach for. There's a moment after the war that encapsulates the relationship between Grant and Sherman. They are sitting on a porch in Washington. The war is over. They are both in civilian clothes. Someone asks Grant about Sherman's march. Grant takes a puff of his cigar. He looks out at the street. He says, "Sherman's campaign was the most brilliant of the war." He does not elaborate. He does not justify. He simply states it as fact. Sherman looks at him. There is an understanding between them. They both know what the march cost. They both know the civilians who starved. They both know the homes that burned. But they also know that the war ended. And sometimes, in the cold calculus of command, that is all that matters. The burning of Atlanta, the march to the sea, the destruction of Columbia, these were not accidents. They were not the excesses of an out-of-control army. They were policy. They were the deliberate application of terror to achieve a strategic goal. Sherman told Grant he could make Georgia howl. He did, and in doing so, he changed the nature of warfare. He showed that in a modern war, the distinction between soldier and civilian, between battlefield and home front, is an illusion. Total war does not recognize that distinction. Total war consumes everything. Sherman lived until 1891. He watched the South rebuild. He watched the myth of the lost cause take hold. He watched Robert E. Lee turned into a saint and himself turned into a villain. He did not care. He knew what he had done. He knew why he had done it. When someone asked him late in life if he would do it again, Sherman did not hesitate. "I would," he said. "If it saved one life of a Union soldier, I would burn every house from here to the Gulf of Mexico." That is the truth that textbooks do not teach. Sherman did not burn Georgia because he was cruel. He burned it because he believed it was the fastest way to end the killing. He believed that a short, brutal campaign was more merciful than a long, drawn-out war. And Grant, sitting in Virginia, grinding Lee into the dirt, understood that logic. He gave Sherman the freedom to execute it, and together they ended the war, not with a treaty, not with a negotiation, but with fire and iron and the breaking of the Southern will. The question is not whether Sherman was right. The question is whether you believe the ends justify the means, and that is a question every generation has to answer for itself.